Hello and welcome back to 4th Age Guides. In this episode we are looking at the Empire of Harad in the 4th Age Total War. Harad is one of my favorite factions on the mod. They can do just about everything. They've got some decent infantry, they've got some very good cavalry, and some good archers, as well as some unique specialized units in the famous Mumakil that they can train. In some ways they're very similar to factions like Rune or Dale, factions that are dominant in their region, factions that get a little bit of everything in terms of military, and factions that can potentially throw their weight around on the campaign map. And when you're playing as Harad, you really do feel like you're playing this this powerful empire who's kind of bullying your lesser neighbors into submission and eventually growing strong enough to take on the might of the reunited kingdom. So it's a lot of fun, a very interesting campaign, and because of its favorable geographical position, its vast resources that are available to it, and its very strong economy as well as a very competent military, this faction might be a suitable one for your first campaign in the 4th Age Total War. It's a good introduction to the mechanics. It is also a pretty good introduction to the cultic switch mechanic if you're interested in going a slightly darker route for your Empire of Harad. And so there's just a lot of fun options to be had. So let's jump into the campaign here. Now, Harad is considered to be a major faction, which grants it access to the full suite of specialization, buildings, and city development. It has just a ton of options available to it. You have about 2 or 3 starting regions as the Empire of Harad, and your homeland, essentially your core, is going to be the Umbar coastlands. And so that's these 4 settlements here with a couple of forts as well. The coasts and the sea in general are going to play a very large role in your campaign, more important for you than potentially any other faction, with the possible exception of the Reunited Kingdom. In fact, your war with the Reunited Kingdom is going to initially focus largely on naval encounters, and you do have the fleets and the capability to grow those fleets to ensure that you are successful in those early conflicts. You've got 3 basic boats available to you: the Southron Ship of War, which is available pretty much everywhere, and then these Corsair fleets, which are much more improved. The Corsair Dromond, and then finally the Corsair Marauder. The Corsair Marauder is the one that I would be training pretty much exclusively, although you will of course be retraining these other ships and potentially training some of them as needed. Umbar City is the place where your fleets are going to come from, because it starts with a Corsair stronghold already built. This allows you access to the Dromond and the Marauder that I mentioned, as well as some infantry units, Corsairs of Umbar and Corsair archers, which you can see here already starting off in your capital, as well as scattered throughout some armies across the map. It is a long coastline for you to defend, but I think you need to be aggressive about this and ensure that the Reunited Kingdom does not start attacking your settlements and your coastlines and locking your ports down, because as you can see, there's a lot of trade going on here. Initially you're trading, of course, with yourself, but also with the port up here that you have captured, your northernmost outpost on what is it, Tol Falas. You are also potentially trading with Harandor, although if you followed the advice in this campaign video, you will not be trading for them much longer. You're going to be going to war with them fairly early to assert your dominance in the region. But you start off, as you'll see here, with pretty powerful fleets in the area, although it has to be said the Reunited Kingdom has some advantages in ships as well. So you're going to need to work your fleets together and make sure that they are reinforcing each other, and make sure that you're training more Corsair Marauders to bring them up. And I like to have some fleets basically blockading Dol Amroth, some strong fleets around the Linhir region and Pelargir, and then just keep some other boats scattered along the coast to ensure that when you win, let's say, a naval battle and the enemy fleet withdraws, you can hit it again and ensure that it gets sunk. Sometimes you'll see the Reunited Kingdom will send armies onto their fleets, and you will find nothing more satisfying than sending those strong armies to the bottom of the ocean. Now, in terms of Harlorn, this starts off with some units, but it's not the strongest, and this is not going to be the easiest place to hold on to. You might consider abandoning it and sending those units somewhere else, potentially to help with your war with Harandor. But you could probably hold this because in my campaign, no one ever landed here. I was able to pretty much lock down the coast so that anytime I saw a boat outside of a port, I was able to sink it. And the Reunited Kingdom did try a few times to get units onto ships, but I was able to get rid of those every single time. So some might slip by, but you can probably hold on to this, but you'll notice that it will take a while before it is useful. There's no walls here initially. You have not even established your outland dominion yet, and it'll take you 8 turns to even do that. Once you do that, before you can even build walls, you'll have to build a minor province development. So you'll have to do a bit of teching up before you will see any use out of this province. However, once you do, you'll see that it does give you some local levies that you can't train anywhere else initially. Some Gondorian hillmen and some Gondorian axemen. The nice thing about these guys is that they are effective against armor. You can tell, though, that they have extremely low armor themselves, but at least they have low upkeep. So these guys will be useful garrison troops. Potentially, these guys can be good flankers. So that's the Umbar region. Now, Umbar itself has excellent options in terms of military training, but it's pretty far from the front. So you're going to want to advance roads throughout your kingdom. Make sure that you build roads in these types of places so you can quickly get your troops over land into the fights where they're going to be needed. And then you do want to think about how you're going to develop your settlements. Anambar is an interesting one. This would almost be a better candidate for the Corsair stronghold if you wanted to potentially tear down this one and build something else here. The Corsair stronghold is a specialization building, so it might be good for us to talk about that. Let's see, we've already built our specialization building here, so let's go into Anambar and check out city development. So as a minor faction, you're going to get this city development building as an option. As soon as you get to the highest tier of development in a city, you can choose how to specialize it further. Because you are also a potentially cultic faction, you get these two options, the Cultic Temple City or the Cultic Scions of Harad. The Cultic Temple City is what you will go for if you're interested in public order. So maybe you've conquered a settlement that's really far from home, and you're having trouble maintaining public order there. You would go with this, I suppose. Cultic Scions of Harad are going to give you more advanced cultic elite units, so this might be a slightly more attractive option for the long run. Corsair Stronghold, we already saw. This is what gives you access to some of your good fleets as well as some interesting infantry units. But Anambar, the reason I say this might be a good option for this is that Anambar does not start with any resources, and the Corsair Stronghold doesn't require any particular resources either. You just need to build military policy and have a coastal Harad province. So this fits that criteria. Meanwhile, Umbar City does have some resources. It's got timber, it's got iron, and the iron is useful for the iron foundry. So you might think it might be slightly more useful to go for the iron foundry to increase the armor of your troops that are trained here, because you're probably going to have some good troop recruitment out of Umbar City. In fact, you already can train some pretty solid units, I think up to tier 3. In terms of other specialization buildings, though, a very notable one is the Mumikil Training Grounds. So this requires ivory, which is scattered over 3 of your provinces. And these are the only 3 places on the map where you will ever be able to train Mumikil. That's Athendad, which has ivory over here, Akas Anabon, and to the northeast. This is where I would recommend you train your Mumikil. This is going to require you to get to a military policy, get to the Lord's Barracks, which is, I believe, the highest tier of military development, and have, of course, ivory. And you can train a Mumikil out of Now, this is a good place for training Mumikil because it's very centrally located. It allows you to recruit them here and then quickly send them to the front. Like, let's say if you're fighting Harandor or you're fighting in Gondor, you want some elephants up there to help you out. But you can also send them to the east in case you want to overawe the barbarians on your border over here. So just makes a great location, and also it seems to be slightly less productive in terms of trade income than Akas Anabon and Athendad, both of which make very good financial settlements, and both of which might focus on the Merchants Guild instead. This is going to be an obvious specialization building for those wealthy provinces, either because of ivory or potentially because of their position on the coast. The other 2 are more agent focused, which is interesting. Harad has the option to create the most powerful agents in terms of spies and assassins of any faction on the map. So you can really uniquely leverage your campaign strategery by using these agents and improving them through these specialization buildings. The High Inquisitor's Network allows you to train skilled spies, but it also gives you a special unit, the Inquisition Enforcers. So this is kind of like a version of the Scarlet Shields that's just a bit more intimidating, I guess. But it's a very useful unit to have as you start to go cultic, and some of your native troops no longer are available. These guys will remain. So it's an interesting unit to have in the late game. The Brotherhood of Assassins, as you might expect, gives you good assassins, and so like you've got some to start. You've got one guy over here who starts with 4 experience, and this guy starts off with, I think, maximum. So this is he's got a couple of ancillaries that give him some bonuses, but with the Brotherhood of Assassins building, you can train guys who have pretty considerable skill. What I would use your rogues for, which is what we call assassins in the mod, is not so much assassinating enemy characters, although this guy in particular could actually be effective at doing that. But I would send them to destroy infrastructure. So think of your rogues as saboteurs primarily. You send them in conjunction with spies to infiltrate enemy settlements and destroy military production, financial production, destroy their dominion buildings, like their homeland dominion, for example, and then the AI will have to rebuild that, and it'll essentially stop their production capabilities. So this is a really good tool to use against like Gondor, because this part of the map is very wealthy, and you'll notice the Reunited Kingdom training a ton of troops out of here, very high quality ones. And if you can cripple their infrastructure, then of course that'll give you the upper hand. Okay, so that's for specialization buildings. Let's see, in the sort of the central part of the map, a useful settlement to point out is Carenbad. This has the chief city marker. So this is a city that you can build in any direction. Instead of having to choose military, financial, or administrative, you can build everything here. You can have everything from libraries to execution squares to the highest military development to the highest trader. So it makes it a very versatile and powerful settlement to have, and it also benefits from stone walls, which is going to make it that much easier to defend. You'll notice that just to your south there are some Far Harad provinces, and you are going to be in conflict with Far Harad. It may be that they attack you while you're off fighting Harandor or something. So it's nice to have this settlement here. I like to train just like a few units of red sand archers immediately, just to sort of help hold the walls in case that happens. And if nothing else, it's a bit of a deterrent. Over in the far east, you start off with one lone settlement, Karis Agar. Now this is not terribly well developed. It has the lowest level of wooden walls. You can't put any archers on these. And it has the basic tier of military development, which only allows you to train your extremely low tier infantry and skirmishers. The skirmishers are the better buy, I would argue, so I again like to train up a few units of these while I'm getting to tier 2 of mustering fields. This is going to give you such iconic units as your Swords of Harad, the very cheap and effective red sand archers, and the also surprisingly effective Haradwaith riders. So getting to tier 2 military development, very important over here, because this is really very much a border settlement, and you're going to find yourself into conflict with Far Harad as well as Khand over here. Neither of these factions are too problematic for you, because for the most part you will have superior cavalry or infantry, and you certainly have the option of training lots of archers to shoot them down. Neither of those factions is going to have terribly good armor most of the time. So you can probably deal with what they have to offer, but you do want to keep up the pressure. And that will be made easier by the fact that your economy is incredibly strong. And it will get stronger as the game continues. So again, by continuing to put pressure on the fleets and the ports of the Reunited Kingdom, you'll ensure that your own ports are not put under blockade. By attacking your neighbors early and asserting your dominance as the true emperor in the region, you will be able to gain more territory and even subjugate them to get protectorates. Now, I've talked about protectorates before in several other videos, and for Harad, it's probably the easiest of any faction to get multiple protectorates within the first like 20 or 30 turns. So my recommendation here, we'll see this as we look at the video of the campaign already in progress. My recommendation is that early on you start a war with Harandor. You will need to take this settlement for yourself. It's their capital, and it's on your victory conditions list, Harn Gond. But otherwise, you could theoretically let them have the other 4 settlements here, and you could drive them into a protectorate state. This has the benefit of locking down the border between you and Ithilien, so whoever is up here, whether that's the United Kingdom or Adunabar, they will not be inclined to start a war with you and march troops down here. So you essentially free up all the troops. Once you have essentially subdued Harandor and left them with at least 1 settlement up here, you've blocked off your northern border. Then what I like to do is turn my attention to Far Harad, who does exist along the southern border, and roll up their territory. They've got 3 territories along the south. You will need to take this for yourself, but I don't like to eliminate any factions, because you can use them to create those buffer zones I was just talking about. So with Far Harad, you want to ideally see if they can expand into the north and take some of these rebel settlements for themselves. If they do that, fantastic. Take all of their homelands and then bottle them up in whatever rebel settlement they've taken and force them into a protectorate status, and then gift them territory along the eastern border so that you will have a buffer between you and Khand. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be something you will need to work for, but it's definitely worth doing. Once you've done that, though, you have the excellent geographical defense of the north, in addition to a protectorate in Harandor if you've gone that route. And in the east, if you have a protectorate with a Far Harad, you will have walled off the border against Khand, and there's no need for you to conquer over here. It doesn't really give you anything in terms of income or fantastic units. So I would just let this go, and then you can prosecute your war against the Reunited Kingdom. You can, at that point, continue to train troops and aggressively send them into places like Dol Amroth and Linhir and Pelargir, and ultimately for this climactic battle for Minas Anor. So let's take a look at a campaign already in progress with Harad to show you what that might look like just before you're about to begin the war with the Reunited Kingdom in earnest. Now at this point, it's been not 40 turns yet, but getting close. And I have gotten protectorates out of Harandor as well as Far Harad. So we can see here my eastern border. I have taken all of Far Harad's initial settlements. And because they had taken this 1 rebel settlement for themselves, I was able to put them under siege here, gift them this, and gift them that. And so they became my protectorate. And I think it only cost me something like 20,000. It was a very cheap buy for a protectorate. And of course, if you watched any of my videos that talk about protectorates, you know that you will get all the money back that you gift them for the protectorate status. So I am making, I'm expected to make next turn almost 6,000 in tributes. This is from my protectorates because they're giving me their extra cash. And it does help for you to give them territories. If I just left Far Harad with this 1 poor settlement, they would not be kicking back nearly as much cash to me. So by giving them this settlement here, which did belong to Khand, and by doing the same over here, now I'm trading with all these settlements, and now they're able to make a bit more money, invest in infrastructure, and increase my trade income even more. And now the best part is I don't have to worry about fighting Khand. I don't even want to fight over here into this barbarian territory. I'm just controlling all of this civilized part of the world. Now, one important settlement here is Parchereb. This starts off as rebel, and it does control all of this territory in this long strip just to the south of Mordor. The problem with it is it's very close to one of Khan's starting territories, and they tend to take it early. That's fine, but you do have to be aware of what it means. They can a lot of times send a sneak attack down to if you're not paying attention. So say you're off fighting in Harandor, and Khand has taken Parchereb without you noticing. They're very likely to march an army down here and put under siege. So what I like to do is have watchtowers or spies, just keeping an eye on this. And then when you feel ready, you do want to take Parchereb for yourself. This is because not only does it sort of command this northern part of the map, but it does have some iron, which is going to help eventually with with getting that armor, the Iron Foundry building, but it also allows you to train a very interesting unit that is unique to this area. And this is Parchereb Tribesmen. So this is available just at the control posts. It's a very low tier unit, very low upkeep, but also surprisingly dangerous. So this is an archer unit with a two-handed spear. This makes them very dangerous to cavalry, especially on the attack. But of course, cavalry charging into them is certainly in for a nasty surprise. They are extremely vulnerable to missile fire, so you do want to watch out for that. But they are a very interesting take on the sort of light desert archer, very similar in some ways to your red sand archers, but far superior in melee thanks to those spears. So definitely steal Parchereb at some point and get ready to train these Parchereb tribesmen. You'll find them very useful in your eastern wars especially, where you'll be fighting mostly light armored troops. The interesting thing as well about Harad that makes them really feel like an empire is that as you expand, you'll be able to train different units depending on the region. And so, for example, in Far Harad, if I look at my military development at the highest tier, I will get some men of Far Harad. This is sort of like the Southron champions that Far Harad themselves can train. If I conquer into Harandor, I will be able to train eventually. Where is that? Horsemen of the Harnan, which is a very good unit, but also Harandor Armsmen, which again, this is a unit that you will be fighting against in the early years, and just an extremely well armored, very, very solid unit with even good morale. So it's really useful as Harad to get out into the world and conquer into the other regions. You can see here what I've done in terms of Harandor is I think I got them down to like these two settlements and had them under siege, and then I offered to give back this to them as well as like 50,000 gold. So they were my first protectorate that I got. And yes, it is a little weird that I have Harngond and Haradlan, but not this one. But honestly, if I really wanted, I could buy it from them at some point. It's mostly important that Harandor has this and not me. Because as you can see, the Reunited Kingdom has done well in its war with Adunabar. They tend to win when you're playing Harad. And so if I had taken this for myself, I would be fighting off stack after stack from the Reunited Kingdom. This way, I don't have to worry about that, at least for a while, and I can instead focus on continuing my naval superiority and getting an army together to go into Gondor. At this point, I'm making a lot of money from diplomacy. I can afford basically to build every turn, everywhere, and train whatever I want. Now, one of the things for the later game to consider is converting to the cult. In the early part of the game, it's not going to be a great option for you because you're going to be fighting units that are very similar to your own. But in the late game, you really might consider it because you're going to be fighting the Reunited Kingdom, who are going to have heavier units, much more resilient. It's going to be a bit harder to break these guys than what you found in Harandor or Far Harad. Cultic Conversion brings with it some different unit options, and these can be, in some cases, superior to your own. So if we take a look at what you might have in Caranbad, for example, at the highest tier of military development, your native recruitment is this, but your cultic recruitment is this. And you'll notice that you have fewer units available when you turn to the cult, but those units are pretty solid. So instead of archers of the Harad, horsemen of the Harnan, spearmen of the Serpent, and scarlet shields, you will have swords of the shadow, spears of the shadow, and shadow riders. Now, these are really good units. Their upkeep is much higher, but your economy should be able to support it pretty easily. And they can provide, in particular, Swords of the Shadow, something that you don't really have, which is a solid sword infantry unit. You do have a unit in the Harandor Armsmen that's similar, but these guys have even better armor. And the Shadow Riders are an extremely heavy cavalry unit. You also have the option in Umbar of training a... let's see, where are they? Black Numenorians. Oh, I think that's a cultic unit. So you need to get the cultic specific buildings in place before you can train Black Numenorians. This is a heavy infantry unit, two-handed swords, very good armor, but they're also a bodyguard unit, so you will get a family member out of this. But again, it does require you to build up to the highest level of cultic temples and have a certain amount of infrastructure in there. But the thing about converting to the cult for Harad is that it's not as easy for you to do that as it is for a faction like, say, Rune. Because Rune, of course, is going to start off right near Mordor, and as you expand into Mordor, these places are going to be cultic. They're going to have cultic temples already built. You're going to take over them and probably leave those cultic temples intact, and naturally you will tend to convert as Rune if you do this, if you just keep going into Mordor and maybe switch a couple of your settlements. With Harad, you're going to need to be much more intentional about your cultic conversion. And you'll need to set aside a few provinces where you're going to tear down your native buildings like the tribal moot, or what would it be in Umbar City? Tribal grants. And these buildings give you a lot of money. They give you a lot of land tax revenue. They give you some law bonuses, some income tax and population growth, and experience to your units. So these cultural conversion buildings are extremely useful, and converting to the cult will require you to tear some of these down, most likely, and build cultic versions instead. And so it's going to take some time, and in my experience, it actually also challenges your ability to hold a lot of settlements, because you will find that converting is going to anger the population. Again, it uses the basic religion mechanic from Barbarian Invasion. So right now we are completely Ways of Darkness, but the Ways of the Shadow Cult is a completely different alignment. And so it takes a while for that to kick in and for the public order to return, which is why the administrative policy is a bit useful here. So Harad has the option of going into different policy versions. If we look at a building, just sort of any policy development building, so you get 3 options in addition to the open policy, which is available in chief cities. Most factions on the map only get the option of developing their cities to specialize in military or financial directions. But you, as Harad, along with the Dunedainic factions, also get the administrative option. This is more for public order buildings, law buildings, things like higher tier libraries or inquisition networks, things of those along those lines. And those buildings also tend to have some kind of hidden bonuses. They tend to provide you with your family members with better traits or ancillaries. So there might be some not immediately obvious reasons why it's a good idea to go administrative. But one of the reasons administrative is going to be useful to you is as you convert to the cult, you'll need ways to keep the public order in your provinces. And the administrative buildings that are going to be available to you will help you do that. So for some examples here, places of healing, this is going to require you, the highest tier of this is going to require either that it's in a chief city or it's an administrative policy. So you can build the healer here, which is the tier 2 for growth and public health, which does increase happiness. This could be open administrative or military, but the highest tier is going to need administrative or a chief city. Places of mirth, this will require financial or administrative. Courts and gardens, open or administrative. Again, public order, some benefits to income tax as well. Law enforcement, administrative. So the administrative buildings for Harad are going to be important. In some cases, they're going to be necessary for you to build certain specialization buildings. And in others, they're just going to be handy to help control the population. So at this point, what do I have for provinces? 24. I'm going to need 45. So I am more than halfway there. But as you can see, that a lot of my conquering is going to be in Gondor, and that'll be sort of a phase 2 challenge. Probably the next thing I'll want to do, now that I can afford to hunker down without worrying about being invaded, is look at converting over towards the cult and think about how that's going to look. So a very interesting campaign. Harad allows you to sort of set yourself up on a vast swath of the map, really assert your dominance over your neighbors, and get tribute out of them, which I find so enjoyable. And then gear yourself up for the big showdown in Gondor. So it's a very fun, and it builds to a nice climax when you're playing as the Empire of Harad. And again, I'd strongly recommend this for an early campaign if you want to play with the diplomacy side of the game and sort of see all the different options you can get for the buildings and specializations and things like that. A lot of variety in Harad. They will face some challenges for sure, but you have enough to deal with it. So in the battle guide video, we're going to look at some of the units available to Harad, and of course, they have a lot of variety there as well. I hope you'll join me for that. Until then, take care, everybody.